Welcome to the Mobilized podcast. We equip Christ followers to boldly and courageously live mobilized in their faith, purpose, and life. Let's join James and Nichole.
Hi, friends, and welcome back to episode number 42.
Nice.
Yeah, Nichole here with James.
Here I am.
Which, by the way, we're husband and wife. Ooh. Have we ever even said that out loud?
I tell everyone. You keep it a secret.
I do not. But as promised, we're going to be hearing about James' God story. What a God story is before you invite God into your life, into your problem, into your mess, into all the things, it's your story. You're writing your own story. But the moment you invite God into it, it becomes his story. You submit and hand over the pen to God, and you allow him to take control and to start writing your story for you. And so every time we tell about what God's done in our life, we're not telling our story. Mm-hmm. We're telling God's story.
Yeah.
And I always say the Bible's written, Genesis, Revelation, right? You hear me say it all the time, actually. It's written, but God's story is not complete. His story is still told through us. Yeah. We get to continue his story. And so today we get to hear James' God story.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, what God's done in your life. For once, we're not going to be tattling on me.
I think I collectively heard thousands of listeners tune out.
No.
It's not nearly as interesting or exciting as Nichole's story, but
it's a good thing, too.
It's God's story.
Yes,
and so
it is.
That's what we have committed to do, is to share God's story with every opportunity.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of the funny thing is I've always been more reluctant. Nichole is the brave one. You know, when we go cliff diving, we're holding hands. She jumps and I hit the brakes and I stand at the top to see if she survives before I jump.
Which is a true story, by the way.
Kind of the story of our life. And so she bravely tells her story in book, in sermon, through a podcast. She knows that it's a blessing to encourage people through God working in her life. For me personally, I'm more private. I feel shame. I feel embarrassment when I should have gone left and I went right. And so I've kept it more to myself. But Nichole's done an incredible job of helping me see the value of leaning in to it being God's story. Mm-hmm. And so, again, thanks for tuning in and joining me on the ride. Put your seatbelt on, and the exits are here, and here. The lavatories are out of order, so just sit tight. And if we get some smooth air, we will be bringing drink service down your aisle. Until then, just listen in and see what God's done in my life. And the hope is that it might be a blessing to you, just as we find encouragement from the triumphs and disappointments in the lives of the people we read about in the Bible.
That's right.
My hope is that my triumphs and disappointments also would be an encouragement and would help others coming maybe along the way to avoid some pitfalls as well. So Nichole has shared that we both grew up as pastors' kids, and that is true. The part that is a little more interesting and sometimes laughable is that those two stories were very different. It's easy to say we were both pastors' kids and someone would get a snapshot picture of, oh, well, you guys kind of grew up the same. But we really grew up very differently, right?
Right.
We've joked. I mean, I grew up Baptist. She grew up Pentecostal.
Right.
And if you don't really understand those differences, no fault to you. You're probably better off not knowing them. But Google them just for fun. I mean, Google or YouTube, Baptist preachers and Pentecostal preachers. And 5 seconds in, you're going to see some stark differences that will help you understand the explosive union that was the Chavez household when we became husband and wife. But my story started a little earlier than Nichole's. Her parents accepted Christ when you were 9?
3.
3?
But they started a church at 12.
At 12, okay. Yeah. I made up 9. I think at 9 she started praying for her incredible husband. That's probably why 9 stands out. But for me, I was an infant. I was like 6 months old, and my parents accepted Christ. Someone that my dad was working with witnessed to him, told him about Christ 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for months, and he had no interest. And one day he said, I will go to church with you if you shut up about your Jesus stuff. So he went to church with him, and that day both my parents went forward and accepted Christ. And so, some people say I was born a Christian. really feel like I was, for all intents and purposes. Grew up in church. My dad just couldn't get enough, wanted to be in ministry. He didn't know what that meant. So he moved our family to California, where he and my mom went to Bible college, so he could learn about ministry, learn how to be a pastor. So I, spent preschool and kindergarten and first grade and some of those years in California. Again, they took me to this private school, to this Bible college. So there was a daycare at the college. So I can remember, very vividly all of these experiences. That's where I accepted Christ, in California. I was 4 years old, and I was upstairs in our little apartment, our townhouse, and I came down and I said, I just asked Jesus to come live in my heart. I wanted him to be my best friend forever. And that next Sunday, I was baptized, and we had an outdoor baptismal tank, and the preacher, he had a crew cut. He was a real stern, wasn't even Southern Baptist, independent Baptist. So he was, Southern Baptists were too liberal and progressive for this guy. He said, if women wear pants, it makes God vomit.
Wow.
Yeah, I remember clearly that Sunday school lesson. It terrified me. I'm like, whoa, I think my mom wore pants one time. Mom. So again, that's just a glimpse into kind of the legalistic kind of lens of the preachers that influenced my upbringing and my family.
Yeah.
But very early on, I understood the need for Jesus in my life. There wasn't this kind of, living 20 or 30 years of rebellion and then coming back as a prodigal son. Jesus, I love you. You're always here. You're speaking to me. I see you at work in my life and in my family. So for a long time, I was the voice of conviction. I still regret to this day, but I made my dad feel so guilty that he had a record destroying / burning party, and he got rid of thousands of dollars of original Beatles albums and all these great releases from the 60s and 70s before he was a Christian. And he said, well, we need to live for Christ, and I don't think this music honors God, and so if it's not good enough for me, it's not good enough for someone else. I'm not going to sell it or give it away, so let's destroy it. And, little 4 or 5 year old James was happy as can be. Hey, we're living for Jesus, going through the grocery store saying, hey, Mommy, why is that man buying nasty liquid? Because he's buying alcohol, I'm like, everything was for Jesus. And if you didn't live that way, I was shocked.
Yeah.
I had no context of people that didn't exclusively live for Christ. So we moved back to Albuquerque. My dad does become a pastor of a church. So I, at a very early age, I'm third grade. Now he's the pastor. I went to private school all those years. Finally, in middle school, I did go to public school, and that was kind of a shock. But I had an office at the church where my dad was the pastor. I had a paper route at the church. I kept a bicycle and a motorcycle at the church and in the church kitchen, So it was my clubhouse. It was where I lived.
Right.
The food pantry is where I'd eat the communion wafers and the cookies when I was hungry after school. And I felt freedom. Swam in the baptistry tank. But here's the thing that didn't happen. I didn't have a boldness for Christ that you would expect for someone completely immersed in Christianity and the hope and love of Christ. So that was shocking when you look in the rearview mirror. So in those young years of life, I can look back, and the biggest thing that stood out to me, I didn't do bad things, but I just wanted to be under the radar. None of my friends really went to church. I didn't have any hardcore fanatical Christian friends. And so for me, it was just I don't want to be known as the pastor's son. If you've seen Footloose, that's not a good thing. It's that's usually the odd one out that's the Bible thumper, or the wildly rebellious one that, makes your family look horrible and Jesus. Right. So I didn't want to be either of those. So I just wanted to be normal. I just wanted to be accepted. I just wanted to be cool. Didn't even want to be the coolest, just not like the mathlete or chess club captain.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Those were bad if that was you. But when I was in school, I did not want to be that. But I didn't have to be, captain of the football team or class president. I just didn't want to be weird.
Right.
And in hindsight, that breaks my heart. I look at the wasted opportunity because I wasn't weird, I guess. God gave me opportunity and influence that I squandered. And so I get through school, high school, all the way. And our church had a daycare during the week. And I can remember thinking when people ask, oh, what does your dad do? so desperately inside, I'd have this battle. I'd want to just say he's like the director of a daycare center. Like in my mind,
that was better
that was
than being a
cooler than
pastor?
being the pastor. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm like, he's, and I don't even think I had the cojones to get it out one time, but I always wanted to. And so that was kind of the joke. My dad still to this day says, yeah, you know what? We just used to tell people I was a daycare director, you know, to save face. But it's like, you know, you'd mumble it. Yeah, he's a pastor of a church. You know, he's a preacher. Like, what?
Because immediately you start getting all the apologies for all the cursing they did in front of you, for, you know, they start confessing their sins, and you're like, seriously, just, it's like when you trip or something, everybody asks you if you're okay, and you're like, stop asking me, just look away.
Don't focus on it.
Exactly. You say, my dad's a pastor, and you're like,
yeah.
don't focus on it, look away.
You see their quick inventory of all the things they want to do with you, they no longer can.
Yes.
Okay, we can't have fun anymore.
And they start looking back over all the things that they've told you and said. Yeah.
Like, oh no, I was so judged by this guy. But I desperately just wanted to be accepted, wanted to be normal. And for whatever reason, I felt like that made me not normal. And the ironic thing is, we're not supposed to be normal.
Right.
What are we? We're holy and we're set apart. But fear and insecurity kept me trapped in that prison, kept me from leveraging my influence that I had. I had a couple of close friends. I did bring them to church, mostly because, you know, that was where I was hanging out. I'm like, hey, I'm going to do my paper route. You want to come hang out? Hey, I'm going to ride my motorcycle. You want to come hang out? And they just, by proximity, were there. They heard the word of God, and they got saved, and they got baptized. So that is the win. But I wasn't like leading like campus crusaders for Christ on my campus, or the Bible club at lunch, or, you know, witnessing, or doing like youth night rallies. No, none of that. Just, you know, I was a musician, played trumpet in the band. And then I had guitar class. We had recitals. I'm playing Metallica and, you know, Orleans. I'm not doing anything Christian. I'm not giving any indication that this has changed my life in any way.
Yeah. And isn't that crazy how we are walking through life far from God? You know you need God. And so you turn your back on the world and you say, okay, I need God. You accept him into your life. And then you're like, the last thing I want people to know now is that I picked God.
Yes.
Like, I want to look just like them now.
Right.
Okay, I looked like them. I knew I didn't want to look like them, so I accepted Christ. Now that I've accepted Christ, I want to look like them again.
Exactly.
How crazy is that? What kind of deception is that?
It's as crazy as teenage kids wanting to pretend they have no parents.
That's good. Or they don't need a coat in the winter.
Correct.
You're exactly right.
It's 3 below. You got a jacket? No, none of my friends take jackets. It's just in the way. Well, if they catch pneumonia, are you going to catch pneumonia? Yeah, I guess so.
Yes, I guess so.
Or, hey, can you drop me off around the corner?
Yeah.
Or, hey, did you, can I meet your friends? No, that's embarrassing. Well, what do you mean? They have parents? No, they don't. And I don't either. Shut up.
Nobody has parents.
That's what just came to mind. You know, it's like, I need God. God saved me, but now I want to pretend that I didn't need God. And like, I'm just like the people that are still in desperate need of a savior.
Right.
It makes no sense.
No sense
But that's
at
where
all.
I found myself trapped in that kind of spinning wheel, unable to get off. So out of school, in the workforce, what do I do with life? And here's the funny thing. Again, I just was looking for some kind of purpose. I didn't, some of these kids that come out of school, they're so driven. They have a plan, and I admire that. Our kids, in a lot of ways, have that drive and intentionality that I didn't. So I didn't really know what to do. So I said, well, I know you got to have shelter, and you got to have a big screen TV. So I built our first house with the help of my dad and my grandfather. So you had 3 generations. We used to call ourselves either the 3 Amigos or the 3 Stooges, depending on the day. We'd put up lumber, we'd frame, we'd dig foundations, we'd put up fencing. I mean, we're doing the whole thing. Right. 4 years, I built our first house. And so again, what am I doing with life? How am I leveraging influence? How am I leaving a mark? These are questions we all ask. And into my life walks this incredible woman who is a pastor's kid. And I think, we're going to have so much in common. And we don't. She had a very different experience. She didn't love being a pastor's kid and have the safety, I guess, is the way to describe it, that I did. And you've heard a lot of her story, and more is even outlined in her book, The Silenced Army. If you haven't read it, make sure you get it. And, she's so good about using that as an encouragement to others. But again, we had very different experiences, but we still hit it off. We still wanted to be intentional. We still wanted to have purpose. We were driven And so, yeah, it was 6 weeks. We knew each other, dated, and married. So now we're together. Now we're deciding, how do we live this new life that we formed, right?
Right.
And that's where the humor comes in terms of, like, how does a Southern Baptist kid and a Pentecostal kid, like, merge their lives, their faith? Because, I mean, what we tell people all the time, we do marriage counseling, premarital counseling. We'll try and pass on wisdom and experience of almost 3 decades of marriage. Yeah. And one of the things that we absolutely have agreed on is God's in it with you.
Right.
He's not something you sprinkle on like a little seasoning. He's not a little 5 spice in your life. He's the main thing, that at the foundation, and we're joining him in the relationship. Right. And that is what we did, and that's why we survived.
Yeah, because what we had in common was Jesus.
Yes. And that was, without that, I mean, it wouldn't have worked, because we were so different in experience, background, and even expectation, if I would quantify it that way. So again, we've joked, I said, will you marry me? She said, as long as you promise to never work for a church. Ha ha ha. Fast forward a couple of decades later, we've been working for churches. Right. Shame on us. We have egg on our face, proverbial egg on our face. Thank you, God. But again, I did try and keep that promise, because I didn't have the desire to go into the family business like my dad. I was like, some guys do. They see it and they're like, their dad mentors them, and they're trained up and they're ready to take the mantle and go into ministry and be a pastor as well. And I admire that. That was not my story. I had no desire to do it, no indication. It never once was that an inkling of a next step. So I went into banking. God blessed me, and I had an opportunity to get in with, at the time, was the largest bank in America, and on the ground floor with some great opportunities, great mentors, and we just worked hard. That was something that was ingrained in both you and I. Yeah. Whatever we do as unto the Lord. Even if we're not, witnessing and going crazy, the integrity and work ethic is just fundamental in who we are. So we always stood head and shoulders above the rest, and I would get promoted all the time, had opportunities. And so I ended up becoming, in my 20s, the youngest vice president in our Southwest region with the largest bank in America. And so, again, God was just blessing. And I thought, this is my life story. When I was a little kid, I would empty out my Hot Wheels from my little Hot Wheel case, and I'd pretend it was a briefcase, because I always wanted to have an office with a briefcase, and I would write out fake little papers and checks like I was a banker. I didn't even know banking was cool, but I just thought that's what grown-ups do.
They can't see it, but I have so many hearts in my eyes right now. Like, so many hearts in my eyes. You can see the little James. I can.
With his button-up shirt and his little fake briefcase.
Yes, you're adorable.
It was pretty amazing, but it was in a lot of ways telling of what God was going to do in my life. And so banking really fit me. It fit my personality. It fit my skill set. I love numbers. I love data. I love growing things. And so this was a fantastic opportunity to leverage tools to help people realize their financial goals and dreams. And so I became a wealth strategist, and that's exactly what I was doing. I managed financial centers. I got to lead and mentor people. And so I was having the time of my life. Yeah. Until one day, out of the blue, I'm having a conversation with the pastor of our church, and he says, "Hey, why aren't you in ministry?" And that was almost like record scratch, like at the dance, like... Yeah. And all heads turn, and it's silence. Like, what?
What do you mean?
Why would you ask that question? Like, out of the blue.
And why me?
I've given you no indication. Right. Like, what did I do wrong to make you think that?
How have I misled you?
Yes. I did promise my wife several years earlier that I would never go into ministry. That's one reason. Right. I grew up as a pastor's kid. I've seen behind the curtain, the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's another
10 reasons.
And I'm blessed with a great career. I've got a great 401k. I've got stock options. We've got a big house, fancy cars. We had matching Porsches.
We did.
We had his and hers Porsches.
Yes.
And we got Rolex watches. We're taking vacations. Disney, of course. We had everything we thought we wanted. Yeah. I had respect, and that was important to me. I was always proving my worth, that I was worthy of respect and the opportunity that was given me. So I would try and outwork everyone. And I finally had respect in a way that I thought, this is it. It doesn't get any better. And then my pastor says, why would you trade all that for ministry? In my mind is like the dumbest thing he could ask. So I said, politely, that's not really in the cards for me, Pastor, but thank you very much. Well, about a month later, he calls back and he said, hey, I know we had that conversation, and you said, ministry wasn't really your thing. I get it. But God's really just kind of laid it on my heart to challenge you. And I've been talking with some of the pastors and elders at our church. Your name keeps coming up. So I thought I'd reach out again. I thought, well, that's really strange. No one's really ever done that. And okay, I guess I'm Christian enough to know the Christianese response would be, I'll pray about it. That's code. The same as a parent is like, I'll think about it. It's like, that really means no, but it's a polite way of saying no. So it's like, I'll pray about it. Wink, wink.
And I remember that phone call. I remember because I could hear it.
You could hear.
I was sitting next to you and I could hear it. And my heart started pounding. And I looked at you and shook my head no, like, don't you dare. You promised.
Yes. I did swear.
You did.
And, again, a lot of the decisions to this point, we wouldn't have said it at the time, were fear-based.
Yeah, absolutely.
We
100%.
Making decisions out of faith.
Right.
It was fear of losing our family.
Yes.
Fear of outside forces affecting our comfort, our
Right.
security, this great thing that we thought we had built. Yes, God, but we had built.
Right.
And that's kind of where we realized maybe God's trying to get our attention. But again, Nichole hears his voice on the other end of the line, and she's just shaking her head and mouthing the words no.
No.
If you've ever seen The Office, when Michael Scott is bringing on a new HR director, because Toby is his nemesis. He hates the HR director, Toby. And so he's leaving, and he wants to impress the new HR director, but he's desperately wanting to be cruel to Toby as he's leaving, because that's just how he feels about this guy. So he's like mouthing the words, I will kill you. He's like, but trying to like be cool and loving and a great boss in front of the new HR director, Holly, who he has a crush on.
Yeah.
That's how I felt. She's mouthing.
Yeah,
she's
I'm
like, don't you dare.
I will kill you.
So I said, okay, again, I'll pray about it, fully intending just to like spare my life.
Right.
But be polite, let the conversation end. So unbeknownst to us, that started a year really countdown clock of us kind of wrestling with this back and forth. And not wrestling like in an aggressive on our knees, praying, fasting, seeking counsel of others. It was just some days we think, God, are you doing something?
Right.
God, do you really want me to think about it, wink, wink? Or was that just the platitude I gave in the moment and moving on?
Right.
And some days I'd say, that's the stupidest thing I could do. Don't even think about it. Just, you're doing the right thing. Other days I think, well, is he trying to do something? What would it look like? But again, all I could see were all the obstacles.
Right.
Again, fear showed me the messiness of ministry. I was in a position where I was protected financially, and I thought that financial, security allowed me somehow to put up this wall of protection for my family, which again was an illusion. But in the moment, I felt like it was like the Great Wall of China. I had this fortress protecting us, and nothing could penetrate it. And I think, okay, ministry. I've joked, for those of you that know us, I say all the time, ministry's messy in the sense that if people don't like what's happening at the church or the music that's sung or the carpet color or the messages preached, they'll stop tithing. And if you stop tithing, the staff doesn't get to buy groceries.
Right.
I didn't like that.
Right.
Knowable future.
Yeah,
Uncertainty. I mean, it's terrifying. And I thought, why would I trade in security, respect, prestige, and comfort for a life of insecurity
Preach.
and unknowability?
Preach.
Right? And so we were both in agreement there.
Yeah.
And so, again, back and forth in this 12-month period, God gave me 3 more promotions at the bank.
Yeah.
I mean, after bigger centers, bigger promotions, more stock options, the stock would double and split. I'd get more payouts. I mean, I can't see how it can get better. At this point, I've got an 8th floor office with a view in downtown Albuquerque.
Which 8th floor is like?
That's the tallest building in Albuquerque.
Tallest building.
There is one taller, grant you, but this is the second tallest. This is not Manhattan for our New York listeners. This is big. So again, it's a big deal. When everyone else is on the ground floor scurrying around, I have insulation, protection, respect. The higher up you go, the better off you are. Got your name on the door. Life is good. And so one day, I'm flying from Albuquerque to Beverly Hills, California, with the bank. It's a work trip. And I have to stop in Phoenix, but I don't deplane this particular time. It's not where I get off, get another plane. I'm sitting on that plane. Others, are going to get on the plane and join me, and then we continue on to California. So I'm sitting there waiting for the passengers to get off, that's their destination, others to get on. I'm looking out the window. Heat's rising. If you've ever been to Phoenix, it's super hot. It's hotter than Albuquerque.
You can see
moisture.
the heat.
You see it. It's like
You can see
waves,
it.
like
Yeah.
someone's shaking an invisible blanket,
Yeah.
and the air is literally waving and flapping in front of you. You can feel it. I mean, if you leave your windows rolled up, it can shatter your windows because the heat builds up pressure. They tell you to crack your windows. Like, it's like no joke there. So I'm watching the airline employee throw the luggage on the underside of the plane for the people that have checked their bags. And he's throwing them. I mean, this is like a bad, like, Samsonite luggage commercial. Banging the heck out of them. So I had two thoughts. One was, I'm glad I carried on and I didn't check because it might not make it there because this guy is showing no love and respect to the luggage. But the second was, this guy must really hate his job. I mean, my gosh, to be out there with all the padding and what he had to wear, throwing these 50-pound heavy bags in this stifling heat, wow. And then I thought, God, why did you create the system this way? Why is it that we have to spend more of our life at our job than anything else? Because most of us, if we're being honest, don't love our jobs. That's why, I mean, work is synonymous with grunt, right?
Right.
Weekend is fun. Recreation is fun. Vacation is fun. In school, recess is fun. But work, not so much, right? I mean, very few people, when polled, would say they have the dream job, that they would do it even if they didn't get paid to do it. This is what they were created to do. Most of us endure it out of necessity for the monetary reward that it brings so you can sustain your life.
Right.
So I think, why, God, did you do it that way? Why more hours of our day and more weeks and years of our life than anything else we'll do? Ministry, recreation, hobbies, family. So I find myself kind of ranting. Fortunately, not out loud. I think they would have, committed me. But in my mind, I'm going back and forth with God. Why? One of your kids doesn't like it, and I'm going to let you know. And so, as Nichole has shared so many times, God loves when we talk to him and we share. He's not offended by it.
No.
It's not news to him. He just loves that you're opening up and you're telling him what you care about.
Right.
And this was one of those moments for me. I finally was letting go and just kind of vomiting my thoughts on God, and he has big shoulders and he could take it. And so in that moment, I felt like he let me rant, and then he whispered in my ear, "Hey, kid, just because you don't like it doesn't mean I'm going to change it." It's like, oh. Yeah, I kind of just shrunk in my seat in defeat. I really thought I had a case here, and God was going to change the whole order of mankind just right here on this flight. And everyone would say, "James, you're amazing. You got through to God," and he did it. Yay, for he's a jolly good fellow. He's a jolly good fellow. There was no ticker tape parade for me. No, it just, in that moment, it was like, dang, okay. Fish or chicken? I'll take the chicken. All we have is fish. Oh,
Okay.
It was that kind of disappointment. Like, oh. But then I felt like in the pause of that moment, as I had nothing else to say, God whispered, maybe in my other ear, "Hey, well, now that you know that you're going to spend more of your life at your job than anything else you'll do this side of eternity, make sure you pick the right job."
Oy.
That rocked my world.
Yeah.
Because for that year, and really every year prior to that, I had never looked in those types of scales and factors when I was putting this all together in my mind. It was opportunity, and it's more opportunistic. Here's an opportunity, an open door. You take advantage, you work hard, you're rewarded, and the cycle continues. But never in terms of pick the right job. I thought you picked the right job for the highest salary and the benefits package, and the business card with the title. All the letters before and after your name means something. But he was asking me a different question, and I thought, I don't understand it, God. Give me some more information. Use it in a sentence. I don't get what you're trying to tell me.
Use it in a sentence.
It's like I thought I did, and it was back to that. What would you do even if you didn't get paid to do it?
Right.
What's your motivation? And again, let's just play along. Let's just say I leave the bank. Would they be able to survive without me? Oh, sadly, yes. They did limp along. The years I left, actually, they did. It was the big bank burst, and they did struggle for years after that, but I don't think that was my fault.
We blame James.
If I would have stayed, you would not have had the housing mortgage crisis of 07 and 08. But they would give my office to someone else, and I'd fade into obscurity, right? James who? Oh, he used to work here. Oh, great. Was a nice guy. Hopefully. Yeah, great. But God was giving me an opportunity to invest my life in something that was going to outlast me, something with eternal dividend, to use, financial language. I was looking at the here and now, building my kingdom, really praying prayers that I could answer in my own power. And God was asking me to look bigger, deeper, like down the corridor into eternity, and say, do you want to invest your life in things that are bigger than you, that are going to outlast you and your kids and their kids and their kids? And again, so profound in that moment on that flight in Phoenix, Arizona, that I was speechless. I said, I don't know. I'm afraid. And I said it. I don't know what this means. I can't see a way out of this future to where I have all the pieces and all the answers. And I feel like God kind of gently said, you've been asking the wrong question this whole time. Should I be a banker? Should I be a pastor? Banker, pastor, banker, pastor. And he said, I don't care. And that was the first time I felt like he gave some direction. I felt like he, not silent, but just like, we'll talk later, kid.
Yeah.
Like, well, no, I'd really love an answer,
Right.
Should I go left? Should I go right? And in that moment, he said, I don't care what job you take. I care about why you take it and what you do with it. And that moment, it was like this lightning bolt from heaven shot down onto that flight, just to my seat, C4, lit up. And all the fear that I had been carrying around that was driving my decision-making melted away in that very moment. It was gone. And here's the crazy thing. Nothing changed. Messiness of ministry still existed. I'm still dependent on the donations and generosity of obedient Christ followers who say, this is the model that Christ created, and I'm going to be obedient to it. And that's just the way it goes. Like, he didn't just give me a bag of cash. He didn't give me all the answers. He didn't take me fast forward like in a vision 50 years down the road. Here's how your life's going to play out. It's going to be safe.
Right.
I just had to take it on faith, but I wasn't afraid. I had excitement, and it was unexplainable. That was the peace that surpasses understanding the Bible talks about, that I had literally never experienced in my life to that extent. And that was the first moment that God revealed it to me in such a real way that I still look back at that moment with awe, reverence, and gratitude that God would be gracious enough to share something supernatural and weighty with me that day. So we get on the plane. They give us some peanuts and some, cranberry juice, and we land in Beverly Hills, and I'm terrified to pick up the phone and call Nichole because I've had this revelation. I've had this encounter with God. It's going to change my life, but my life means our life. And she said, never work for a church. And I said, okay, what is going to happen now? So I pick up a phone, and Nichole, hi, babe. Hi, hon. How was the flight? Great. I made it. Guess what? What? I think we need to go into ministry.
With the voice cracking, trembling.
Of a prepubescent, nervous boy. I was going to say something horrible. I probably shouldn't.
No.
But I was terrified for the response. And after a moment of silence, it's almost like the cartoons where the lips are almost coming through the phone, like tearing off your ear. But what I heard instead was, I know. I was just waiting for you to figure it out. That was Nichole's response. Do you remember that day?
Oh, yes. I remember clearly.
Was it as heavy for you as it was for me?
It was relief for me. It was relief for me that we were finally there.
Yeah.
Because for that year, you would come home. You were traveling a lot. And you would come home, and we would stay up till 1, 2 in the morning. I remember I'd make cookies at like midnight.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Ooh, that was
I'd
a
make
good time.
cookies,
I
and we'd
gained so much
sit
weight.
and we would go over it, over and over and over. The pros,
Pros
the
and cons
cons,
list.
the
Let's
pros
get out the
and
yellow
cons.
pad.
Yes, and if you know us, you know that we will do our homework.
Yes.
And so we were trying to plan our lives, trying to plan what it would look like when you have no idea what it's going to look like, but you're trying to make it fit what you want it to look like. And then at the end, you're like, okay, so this is what we've decided if we go into ministry, it's going to look like. And you realize actually, we have no idea.
Right.
So scrap it all. We'll start over tomorrow.
Yes.
But it was a process that we were both going through, and God had us on our own journeys, leading us to the same place, but knowing He had to take us different ways to get to that same place because we
Right.
both came from different fears, different conversations with God, different heartaches and heartbreaks, and different places, just completely different places.
Yeah.
So He had to bring us both to the same place.
Yeah.
And it's just incredible what God did. But yes, I remember clearly that day, clearly. And it really was relief. Like, okay, we've like made a decision and it feels good.
Yeah.
It feels good.
And what it showed me was God, again, was working independently at something we couldn't do on our own, bringing us to a place where our hearts were united in this next step, in this decision, because it wouldn't have worked if, one of us just said, hey, this is what we need to do.
Right.
And again, when we talk to married couples, we say that. I mean, God gives you individual callings. We're going to stand before Him individually, not as a couple, and face judgment as to how we invested our life.
Yes.
However, we still have our first ministry to each other.
Right.
And you can't just blow that off. You can't say, I have a higher calling, so, the heck with you. And just, get on board or get out of the way.
Right.
And so you want that unity. You want intimacy and the commonality. And so God was preparing both our hearts simultaneously to come to this point of acceptance so that He could use us for what He had been preparing us for all along, that we were completely unaware of.
Right.
Our background, growing up in ministry, in different ministries, coming together and deciding our first year of marriage, we need to develop our own faith rather than living vicariously from our parents' faith.
Right.
So we're gonna step out. We're not gonna go to either of our dad's church. We're gonna find a different church that we can just learn and soak and dig and lean in and figure out what God has called us uniquely to do.
Right.
Not to disparage our dad's ministries or their churches, but it's kind of one of those things. Sometimes you have to step out and you have to change the scenery so that because sometimes you get lost, you don't see the forest for the trees kind of thing. And God was wanting to teach us some things. And so all the pieces started to fall in place, which was shocking. And so the next call was to my pastor that I had, for a year been putting off, and said, you know what? Hey, Pastor, I'm not afraid anymore.
Yeah.
I think this is what God's saying is the next step for us. And so we worked out a transition plan for the next 6 months to, migrate away from banking and go into full-time ministry. And that's exactly what we did. And that was over 20 years ago. And so again, started in this church startup. God blessed and grew to over 15,000 people at this church. We got to serve together, and you oversaw teams and served there. And then one day, after a decade there, God said, I have other things to teach you that I can't teach you here. And again, kind of like the banking scenario of, I've taken you as far as I can take you here. Are you going to trust me with another step? Will you step off this next cliff even though you can't see the next step?
Yes.
And so we said yes, and we moved away from our hometown, the place we've lived and were born, and all our whole life it was invested there. But we stepped out and we moved away. We moved to South Florida, part of another huge mega church, serving in great roles where we both were able to lead teams and campuses and be part of incredible ministry experience. And then God said, I've got some other things to teach you. Moved us to Tulsa, Oklahoma, where we were lead pastor of church. That, again, was just another God story of how He's using your obedience. And when faith is leading your steps rather than fear, it's incredible. So He's allowed me to be a banker and have that great experience, but was able to spill that over and serve as a worship pastor and an executive pastor and a chief of staff and a lead pastor. And then through all of that, be a coach and a consultant for pastors all across the country that, again, are coming alongside and saying, help me get to places you've been, and I'm able to steward and invest that experience. And that's what birthed Mobilized in so many ways, just to kind of formalize what God was already opening up the doors to allow us to do, where we can teach, we can equip, we can coach, we can steward, we can guide, we can strategize and help people win, pushing down the fear and letting faith rise to the top and guide your decision making. So that's really the story of our life. I wanted to try and be as succinct and not drag this on to be a 12-hour audiobook of James Story, Chapter 9. When I was 7 years old, I wanted to give you the highlights, and I hope it's kept your attention long enough, really just to see God working the thread through the story of fear driving the decisions.
Yeah.
First, fear of standing out, fear of not being normal, quote unquote. I used air quotes like Joey on Friends up here by my face. And then fear of protecting our relationship from ministry and the uncertainty and the pitfalls that our parents had as pastors. And then fear of the unknown, of moving out of the place where we just built our dream home in Albuquerque, and ministry was perfect. Why would we leave? Well, because God said, I'm going to teach you new things. I mean, that's almost like what he said to Abraham. Go over there. Where's over there? I'll show you when you get there. But I want to show you some things. And he just went. And faith led us to that. And God's never let us down. I mean, some people look at our lives and say, you're crazy.
Yes.
Where are you living now? Like, where have you been? Where are you going? Who knows what the future is going to hold? But we've let faith guide the decisions. And our answer is just yes. Now, God, what's the question? We've stopped saying, oh, hold on, I'm afraid. You can still be afraid. You can still have concerns. But you take it to God and say, God, here's my concern. It's your problem. Help, give me the peace. I want my faith to grow because you've never let me down, and I don't believe you're going to do it now. And gosh, our faith has just grown exponentially to where that's the dominant muscle. Now I'm like, Nichole, hold on. You have too much faith. Sprinkle in some fear. You're freaking me out. But God's just continuing to bless, and it's been the ride of a lifetime. And I'm excited to share this with you. I hope it encourages you just to see that, again, faith over fear is possible, even with a stubborn person, an arrogant person that thinks they have all the answers. Maybe you can relate. Maybe your story's a little different, but the common thread that I see through all of humanity with the countless people that I encounter and get to come alongside with in life is that there are things that we're afraid of, and fears do drive and dictate our decisions. You have to deal with the fear. And faith is the antidote to fear.
Absolutely. And there's always going to be an undercurrent of fear, but it's that faith. You got to just build that faith muscle.
Yes.
You got to keep building it to where fear becomes less and less and faith becomes bigger and bigger. And humanity, just our sinful nature is always going to have that thread of fear through every single thing. But you can decide how long fear controls your next decision.
Yes.
How long it'll control it.
How long are you in the wilderness?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can decide that. We get to decide that. And that's one of the gifts of free will that God's given us is to choose. We get to choose how long we listen to fear or if we just immediately step into faith. And that brings us to our next podcast, which is about obedience. We're going to talk about obedience. We talk a lot about faith. We talk a lot about fear. But what is obedience and what does that look like? And there's so many questions around obedience because some people are like, I want to obey. I just don't know what God wants from me. I don't even know what that means.
I have
what does
faith,
it even
but
mean?
How do I take the step?
When? How? What does it look like? I have so many questions. So we're going to be tackling that in our next episodes. I hope you'll join us as we peel that onion back of obedience, what it looks like, when you know it's from God and to step into that. And what our first act of obedience should be. We're going to just unpack it all.
Love it.
In all its messiness.
As we peel back the onion, my eyes are already watering in anticipation. I cannot wait. And you said it recently so well that fear builds mountains and faith moves mountains.
Yes.
So I hope that encouraged you. Make sure you are subscribing so that you get the podcast notifications, so that you get the next episode, and share this with somebody that it'll be a blessing for as well, that needs a little dose of faith and they need to squash the fear. But thanks for tuning in and joining Nichole and I for the Mobilized podcast.
We hope you were encouraged and challenged by today's podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the Mobilized YouTube page and follow us on social media at mobilized.life on Instagram and at Live Mobilized on Facebook. For more information and ways to connect, visit our website at mobilized.life.